What if I told you there's a creature living beneath your feet right now that produces a substance 11 times more nutrient dense than the most expensive fertilizer on the shelf at Home Depot? That it works 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, for free, without electricity, without a factory, without a single dollar of input cost, turning dead leaves and kitchen scraps and rotting roots into a material so biologically rich that no laboratory on Earth has been able to replicate it. It does not come in a bag. It does not have a barcode. It does not have a marketing department or a sales team or a lobbyist in Washington. It has been doing this work for 600 million years, longer than trees have existed, longer than dinosaurs, longer than flowers. This creature was manufacturing the most powerful soil amendment on the planet before the first plant ever grew a root. And every spring, 85% of American gardeners and farmers fire up a machine and drag metal blades through the soil and kill it. By the billions, in minutes. They call it tilling. The soil creature calls it extinction. The creature is the earthworm, Lumbricus terrestris. And what it produces, a material scientists call vermicast, is not just better than store-bought fertilizer. It makes store-bought fertilizer look like a crude, primitive, biologically dead imitation of what nature perfected 500 million years before humans learned to walk. The global fertilizer industry generates $200 billion per year. It mines phosphate from finite deposits in Morocco, China, and Florida, deposits that geologists warn will be exhausted within 50 to 100 years. It synthesizes nitrogen using the Haber-Bosch process, which consumes 1 to 2% of the entire world's energy supply, and was originally developed in 1909 to produce explosives for the German military. The same chemical process that filled artillery shells in World War I now fills fertilizer bags at Walmart. The factories that manufactured bombs were converted to manufacture ammonium nitrate after the war ended. The product changed. The chemistry did not. The profit motive certainly did not. The industry packages the result in plastic bags and ships it thousands of miles to a store where you pay $35 for 25 pounds of granulated chemistry that feeds plants but starves the soil. It provides 3 nutrients, 3, out of the dozens that plants require. It provides them in a water-soluble form that leaches through the root zone during the first heavy rain, contaminating groundwater and creating dead zones in every river and estuary that receives agricultural runoff. The Gulf of Mexico Dead Zone, a 6,000 square mile area of ocean where nothing lives, is created entirely by fertilizer runoff from American farms. The earthworm does the same job, better, 11 times more concentrated, with a biological complexity that synthetic fertilizer cannot approach. And it does it for free in your dirt, right now, unless you killed it this morning with a rototiller. Before we dig into this, if these stories matter to you, the best way to protect this knowledge is simple. Subscribe, hit the bell, and share this with someone who needs to hear what the fertilizer industry prays they never learn. In 1881, Charles Darwin published his final book. Not on the origin of species, not the descent of man, not the expression of the emotions in man and animals. His last book, the final contribution of the most important biologist in human history, was about earthworms. It was called The Formation of Vegetable Mold Through the Action of Worms. He had spent 39 years studying them. 39 years. The man who revolutionized biology, who changed humanity's understanding of its own existence, who shook the foundations of religion and philosophy with a single theory, spent the last 4 decades of his life watching worms eat dirt. His colleagues thought he had lost his mind. The scientific press was confused. The public was bewildered. Darwin, the titan, the giant, was writing about worms? What could possibly justify 39 years of attention to creatures that most people stepped on without noticing? His conclusion shook the scientific establishment more than they expected. Darwin wrote that it may be doubted whether there are many other animals which have played so important a part in the history of the world as these lowly organized creatures. He calculated that earthworms in English pastures move 10 tons of soil per acre per year to the surface through their castings. 10 tons per acre annually, processed through the digestive systems of creatures most people consider bait. Darwin understood something that modern agriculture has spent 140 years aggressively forgetting. The earthworm is not a resident of the soil. The earthworm is the manufacturer of the soil. Without it, the biological infrastructure that supports every plant on Earth collapses. And modern science has proven Darwin's intuition correct in ways he could not have imagined. A 2014 study published in the journal PLOS One analyzed the nutrient concentration of earthworm castings compared to the surrounding soil the worms ingested. The results made fertilizer industry executives uncomfortable. Vermicast contained 5 times more nitrogen than the parent soil, 7 times more phosphorus, 11 times more potassium, 3 times more magnesium, 1.5 times more calcium. Read those numbers again. 5 times, 7 times, 11 times. The worm eats ordinary dirt and dead leaves. It passes the material through a digestive system containing enzymes, beneficial bacteria, and protozoa. What emerges from the other end is a material so concentrated in plant-available nutrients that it outperforms every commercial fertilizer formulation ever manufactured. But the nutrient concentration is not even the most important part. That is what the fertilizer industry desperately needs you to misunderstand. Because nutrients are the least of what vermicast provides. Vermicast is alive. A single gram of earthworm casting contains between 10,000 and 100,000 times more beneficial bacteria than the surrounding soil. It contains mycorrhizal fungal spores. It contains nitrogen-fixing bacteria. It contains phosphorus-solubilizing microorganisms. It contains plant growth hormones, including auxins, cytokinins, and gibberellins that stimulate root development and flowering. A bag of synthetic 10-10-10 fertilizer contains 3 chemicals: nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. That is it. 3 ingredients: dead, sterile, biologically inert. It feeds the plant the way an IV drip feeds a hospital patient. Direct chemical input, no biology, no microbiology, no ecosystem, just chemistry dumped on chemistry. Vermicast contains over 10,000 species of microorganisms working in symbiosis. It does not just feed the plant, it builds the immune system of the soil. It inoculates the root zone with disease-suppressing organisms. It creates a living matrix that feeds the plant, protects the plant, communicates with the plant, and rebuilds the soil structure that future plants will depend on. A 2011 study at Cornell University demonstrated that vermicast suppressed damping off disease in seedlings by 70 to 80%. No fungicide, no chemical treatment. The biological community in the worm castings outcompeted the pathogenic fungi before they could infect the plant. The castings did not kill the disease organisms. They simply filled every ecological niche so completely that the disease organisms could not establish. A 2016 study published in the journal Frontiers in Plant Science found that plants grown in vermicast-amended soil showed 30 to 40% increases in yield compared to plants receiving equivalent synthetic fertilizer. Same nutrients, different source. The biological version outperformed the chemical version by 1/3 because nutrients are not the bottleneck. Biology is the bottleneck, and the earthworm is the bottleneck opener. The tomatoes were not just bigger, they were more nutritious. The worm-fed plants produced food with measurably higher nutritional density than the chemically fed plants. This finding has been replicated across dozens of crops: peppers, strawberries, lettuce, marigolds, corn. The pattern holds universally. Vermicast produces more food with higher nutrient density than synthetic fertilizer. Every time, in every study, from every continent where the comparison has been tested. A 2020 meta-analysis in the journal Agriculture, Ecosystems, and Environment compiled results from 64 field trials across 18 countries. The conclusion was definitive. Vermicompost application increased crop yields by an average of 26% compared to equivalent synthetic fertilizer applications, while simultaneously improving soil structure, water retention, and microbial biodiversity. 26% more food from worm droppings, costing nothing, while the fertilizer industry charges $200 billion per year for an inferior product. The fertilizer industry knows this. They have known it for decades. They fund research into what they call soil health additives and biological amendments. They purchase small companies that produce microbial inoculants. They develop products that attempt to replicate a fraction of what the earthworm provides naturally. And they charge $41 to $80 per bag for products that contain a pale imitation of what the earthworm produces for free in your soil, without your help, unless you kill it. Now, let me show you how you kill it, because you probably did it last weekend without knowing. The rototiller is the earthworm's gas chamber. That is not hyperbole, that is population biology. A healthy, undisturbed soil contains 250,000 to 1.75 million earthworms per acre. These worms create a network of burrows that penetrate 6 to 8 feet deep. Lumbricus terrestris, the common night crawler, builds permanent vertical burrows that function as highways for water infiltration, root penetration, and gas exchange. These burrows are lined with a mucus coating that harbors nitrogen-fixing bacteria. Each burrow is a microecosystem. Each worm maintains its burrow for its entire lifespan of 4 to 8 years. One pass with a rototiller destroys every burrow in the top 8 inches of soil. The blades cut worms in half. Contrary to popular myth, a worm cut in half does not become 2 worms. It becomes 1 dead worm and 1 severely injured worm that usually dies within days. The burrow network built over years collapses in seconds. The microbial communities lining the burrows are exposed to UV light and oxygen levels that kill anaerobic species within hours. A single tilling event reduces earthworm populations by 50 to 90%. That number comes from a 2001 study published in Soil and Tillage Research. 50 to 90% in one pass. In the time it takes to walk across your garden, you exterminate a population that took years to build. The survivors are disoriented, their burrows destroyed, their food sources disrupted, Their egg capsules crushed or exposed to predators and UV radiation that kills them within hours. The violence is invisible because it happens underground. If earthworms were visible, if they screamed, if they bled red instead of disappearing silently into churned dirt, no gardener would till. Imagine dragging spinning blades through a meadow full of rabbits. That is what tilling does to the biological community beneath your feet. The only difference is that you cannot hear it happening. The soil absorbs the screams. A 2019 study from the Indian Journal of Agricultural Sciences went further. Researchers grew tomatoes in 4 treatments: chemical fertilizer alone, vermicast alone, a combination of both, and a control with nothing. The vermicast-only treatment outperformed the chemical-only treatment in fruit weight, fruit number, and vitamin C content. The remaining worms begin rebuilding, slowly. A mature earthworm produces 50 to 100 egg capsules per year. Each capsule hatches 1 to 5 juveniles. It takes 60 to 90 days for a juvenile to reach reproductive maturity. Under ideal conditions, a devastated population can begin recovering within a single growing season. Then spring comes again. The gardener fires up the rototiller again. The population crashes again. The burrows collapse again. The biology dies again, year after year, decade after decade, until the soil is so biologically dead that nothing grows without synthetic fertilizer. And the fertilizer industry smiles, because you just became a permanent customer. This is not conspiracy. This is the business model. The fertilizer industry does not need to sabotage your soil. You do it yourself every spring. With a machine that costs $400 at Home Depot, the tiller destroys the biology. The destroyed biology cannot feed the plants. The plants show nutrient deficiency. You buy fertilizer. The fertilizer feeds the plants, but does not rebuild the biology. Next spring, you till again. The cycle repeats forever. The 200 billion fertilizer industry is built on a cycle of destruction that the customer performs voluntarily and then pays to temporarily remedy. The remedy is the product. The destruction is the prerequisite. The tiller creates the customer. This is not a design flaw, this is the design. In the 1950s, agricultural chemical companies began sponsoring gardening shows on television. As they funded extension programs at land-grant universities, they distributed pamphlets through garden clubs and county fairs. Every piece of educational material promoted the same message. Good gardening begins with thorough soil preparation. Translation: good gardening begins with killing the biology that would have made our products unnecessary. The rototiller became the symbol of the serious gardener. Advertisements showed smiling men guiding tillers through perfectly fluffy soil. The message was clear. Professional gardeners till, amateurs just scratch the surface. The deeper you till, the better your garden. The more you disrupt, the more productive you are. This was marketing. It was not science. No peer-reviewed study has ever demonstrated that annual tilling improves long-term soil health or sustained crop yields. Every long-term study shows the opposite. The Rodale Institute's Farming Systems Trial, the longest-running side-by-side comparison of conventional and organic agriculture in North America, has documented consistently that no-till organic systems match or exceed conventional tilled systems in yield while building soil organic matter, improving water retention, and supporting dramatically higher biological diversity. The study has been running since 1981, over 40 years of continuous data collection, 40 years of side-by-side comparison on identical soil types under identical climate conditions. The results are unambiguous. Tilling degrades soil, not tilling builds soil. No-till organic plots showed higher water infiltration during storms, meaning less erosion and less nutrient runoff. They showed higher drought resilience because intact soil structure retained more moisture. They showed higher earthworm populations by a factor of 7 to 10 compared to tilled plots. The fertilizer industry has never funded a rebuttal because the data is too clean to challenge, so they simply never mention it. Charles Darwin saw this coming. In 1881, he warned that the plow would eventually render soil dependent on external inputs. He was 140 years early. He was exactly right. Now let me connect the earthworm to something even larger, because the worm is just the beginning. The worm is the visible creature. Below it, invisible, is a network so vast and so critical that destroying it should be considered an act of agricultural sabotage. Mycorrhizal fungi, the underground internet of every forest, prairie, and garden on Earth. Mycorrhizal fungi form symbiotic relationships with 90% of all plant species. The fungal threads, called hyphae, attach to plant roots and extend outward into the soil for meters in every direction. A single plant connected to a mycorrhizal network can access nutrients and water from an area 100 to 1,000 times larger than its own root system could reach alone. The fungus trades with the plant. It provides phosphorus, zinc, copper, and water that its hyphae extract from soil particles too small for root hairs to access. In return, the plant provides the fungus with sugars produced through photosynthesis. The exchange is so precise that researchers at the University of British Columbia have documented plants transferring carbon to neighboring plants through the mycorrhizal network. Established trees feeding seedlings through underground fungal highways. Mother trees nursing their offspring through a network that operates on principles of biological cooperation that no economist has been able to model. Dr. Suzanne Simard at the University of British Columbia spent 30 years documenting these networks. Her research was initially mocked. She was told that trees do not communicate, that cooperation is not a biological strategy, that the fungal connections she was measuring were artifacts of her methodology. She persisted. She refined her experiments. She used radioactive carbon isotopes to trace nutrient transfer between trees through fungal pathways. The evidence became undeniable. She discovered that a single Douglas fir tree can be connected to 47 other trees through mycorrhizal linkages. She found that dying trees dump their remaining carbon reserves into the network, distributing their resources to neighbors. She documented mother trees recognizing their own offspring through the fungal network and preferentially feeding them. A forest is not a collection of individual trees competing for light. It is a single superorganism connected underground by fungal threads thinner than a human hair, cooperating in ways that make human economic systems look primitive. Her findings were published in Nature. They were featured in TED Talks viewed 10 million times. They fundamentally changed how ecologists understand forest systems, and they carry a devastating implication for every gardener who tills. Your garden works the same way, if you let it, if you do not till. One pass with a rototiller shreds the mycorrhizal network like a paper shredder processing a manuscript. The hyphae are microscopically thin. They cannot survive mechanical disruption. The network that took years to establish is destroyed in seconds. The plants that depended on it for nutrient access are suddenly isolated, cut off from the underground economy that was feeding them for free. What happens next is predictable. The plants show nutrient deficiency. The gardener sees yellow leaves, stunted growth, poor flowering. The gardener buys fertilizer. The fertilizer replaces poorly what the mycorrhizal network was providing for free. The gardener concludes that fertilizer is necessary. The fertilizer company agrees enthusiastically. A 2018 meta-analysis published in New Phytologist reviewed 438 studies involving mycorrhizal fungi and plant nutrition. The aggregate finding was that mycorrhizal colonization increased plant phosphorus uptake by an average of 73%. 73%. The global phosphorus fertilizer industry generates $28 billion annually, selling a nutrient that fungi provide free of charge to any plant whose root zone has not been destroyed by tillage. Phosphate rock, the raw material for phosphorus fertilizer, is a finite resource. Current estimates suggest global reserves will be depleted within 50 to 100 years. When the phosphate runs out, the fertilizer industry collapses. Unless fungi are still in the soil, fungi that have been solubilizing phosphorus from mineral particles for 400 million years without mining a single deposit, the fertilizer industry is selling you a non-renewable resource to replace a renewable service that your soil provides for free. And they need you to keep tilling so the free service stays broken. Here's where I need to be honest with you, because this is what separates real information from internet hype. Tilling is not universally wrong. There are legitimate reasons to till under specific circumstances. Breaking up severely compacted soil that has been driven on by heavy equipment may require initial mechanical loosening. Incorporating large amounts of organic matter into heavy clay soil can benefit from one-time shallow tillage. Preparing new garden beds from established lawns sometimes necessitates initial soil disturbance. The problem is not occasional purposeful tillage. The problem is routine, annual unnecessary tillage performed out of habit, tradition, and the false belief that soil needs to be fluffed like a pillow every spring. Deep tillage is worse than shallow tillage. Rototilling to 8 inches destroys dramatically more biology than shallow cultivation to 2 inches. If you must disturb the soil, go shallow. Use a broad fork instead of a rototiller. A broad fork loosens soil without inverting it, preserving the stratified layers where different organisms live at different depths. No-till gardening is not magic. The first year of transitioning from till to no-till often shows reduced yields as the soil biology rebuilds. This is the gap that discourages most gardeners. They try no-till for one season, see lower production, and return to the rototiller convinced that the old way was better. The biology needed 2 to 3 years to recover. They gave it 1. The fertilizer industry depends on this impatience. Now here is how you build a system that replaces 200 billion worth of industrial fertilizer with biology that costs nothing. Step 1. Stop tilling. Immediately. This is the single most important action. Everything else depends on this. The earthworms cannot rebuild their burrow networks if you destroy them every spring. The mycorrhizal fungi cannot reestablish their hyphal networks if you shred them annually. Stop the destruction and the biology begins recovering within weeks. Step 2. Mulch. Cover every square inch of bare soil with 3 to 4 inches of organic material. Wood chips, straw, shredded leaves, grass clippings, cardboard. The mulch serves 3 functions simultaneously. It feeds the soil organisms by providing a continuous supply of organic matter. It regulates soil temperature, keeping the root zone cool in summer and warm in winter. It retains moisture, reducing watering needs by 50 to 70%. Here's what happens under that mulch in the first 30 days. Fungi colonize the bottom layer where moisture concentrates. Earthworms migrate upward to feed on the decomposing material. Bacterial populations explode in the humid interface between mulch and soil surface. Beetles, springtails, mites, and centipedes establish communities that process organic matter into forms that plant roots can absorb. A 4-inch layer of wood chips becomes a fully functioning ecosystem within a single month. The mulch is not a soil amendment, it is a habitat. You're not improving your garden, you're building a civilization. Every wood chip is a condominium for beneficial fungi. Every layer of straw is a buffet for earthworms. Every sheet of cardboard is a moisture trap that keeps the biological community alive during drought. Walk through any forest, look at the ground. You will see 4 to 6 inches of leaf litter, decomposing branches, and organic debris. Nobody fertilizes a forest. Nobody tills a forest. Nobody buys a bag of 10-10-10 at Home Depot and sprinkles it between the oak trees. The forest feeds itself through exactly the mechanism I am describing. Mulch, biology, worms, fungi. The system works. It has worked for 400 million years. Your garden is not different from a forest. It is a forest that you keep disrupting. Step 3. Add worms. If your soil has been tilled annually for years, the earthworm population may be critically low. Purchase red wigglers, Eisenia fetida, for composting operations. Purchase European nightcrawlers, Eisenia hortensis, for direct garden inoculation. A pound of worms, approximately 800 to 1,000 individuals, costs $25 to $35 and will establish a breeding population that doubles every 90 days under favorable conditions. Do not dump the worms on bare soil in the sun. They will die. Place them under heavy mulch in the evening. The mulch provides food, moisture, and UV protection. The worms will immediately begin burrowing and processing organic matter. Within 6 months, the population will be self-sustaining. Within 2 years, the population will be unrecognizable. You will find worms every time you move the mulch. That is when you know the system is working. Step 4. Inoculate with mycorrhizal fungi. Commercial mycorrhizal inoculants are available from garden suppliers for $15 to $25 per application. Sprinkle the granular inoculant directly on roots at transplanting time. The fungal spores germinate and colonize the root zone within weeks. Once established, the network is self-sustaining as long as you do not till. Step 5. Wait. This is the hardest step. The biology needs time. 2 to 3 years of no-till management, consistent mulching, and organic matter addition will transform dead, compacted, chemically dependent soil into a living system that feeds plants without purchased inputs. The transformation is measurable. Take a soil test before you begin. Test again after year 1. Test again after year 3. The numbers will tell the story. Organic matter percentage will increase, microbial biomass will multiply, nutrient availability will climb, the soil will darken, the structure will improve, water infiltration will accelerate, and the fertilizer bags will stay in the garage, unopened, unnecessary, replaced by a system that runs itself. Here is the math that makes the fertilizer industry nervous enough to fund lobbying campaigns against organic agriculture. The average American gardener spends $150 to $300 per year on fertilizer, soil amendments, and pest control products. A no-till, biologically active garden costs $50 to $100 to establish. Mulch materials are free or nearly free. Worms cost $30 once and multiply forever. Mycorrhizal inoculant costs $20 once and self-sustains. Total lifetime cost after establishment, $0. $9,000 versus $0. From the same dirt, growing the same tomatoes. The fertilizer industry needs you to till. It needs you to kill the biology. It needs you to stay on the chemical treadmill that 85% of American gardeners ride without knowing they can step off. The earthworm does not care about treadmills. It does not understand marketing. It does not respond to the $200 billion worth of advertising and lobbying that the fertilizer industry deploys annually to convince you that soil is a dead medium requiring chemical life support. The earthworm knows something the industry prays you never learn. Soil is not dead. Soil has never been dead. Soil was never dead. Soil is the most biologically dense ecosystem on Earth. More life per cubic inch than any ocean, any forest, any coral reef. A single teaspoon contains more living organisms than there are humans on the planet, 8 billion organisms in a teaspoon. More bacteria than people, more fungi than cities, more protozoa than nations, more nematodes, more microarthropods, all working in concert to decompose, process, and deliver nutrients to plant roots through channels so sophisticated that soil scientists with electron microscopes are still mapping them after decades of trying. This is not dirt. This is infrastructure. Biological infrastructure that took 600 million years to build. You can either protect it or spend $200 billion per year trying to replace it with chemistry that fails. You do not need to feed the soil. You need to stop killing what feeds it. Charles Darwin watched worms for 39 years. He filled notebooks. He conducted experiments in his garden at Down House. He measured castings with rulers and weighed them on scales. He corresponded with farmers and naturalists across England. And in his final book, published the year before he died, he delivered a verdict that the fertilizer industry has spent 140 years trying to bury. The worm is the engine of the soil. Kill the engine and the machine stops. Feed the engine and the machine runs forever. Your rototiller is in the garage. The earthworms are in the ground. One of them has to go. The $200 billion fertilizer industry is betting you choose the worms. Prove them wrong. If this opens something for you, subscribe and hit the bell. Every like and every share helps spread this knowledge. The next one drops soon.